I'm Olivia Chin, and I learned early that success doesn't always align with what your parents expect. On Christmas Eve, I stood outside my childhood home, adjusting my simple black sweater while trying to quiet the nagging voice in my head that this was a mistake. It had been 10 years since I walked away from their narrow view of success, their constant criticism, and their unyielding expectations. And yet, here I was, back for Christmas dinner, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than my father's entire monthly salary. Not that they needed to know that. Inside, the familiar sounds of laughter, the clink of glasses, and the soft strains of Christmas music floated through the windows. My parents were hosting their usual Christmas dinner, an event that had always felt more like a business function than a family gathering. I knocked lightly, and the door swung open almost immediately. My mother stood in the doorway, her face carefully crafted into the expression of polite disappointment she'd perfected just for me. "Olivia," she said, her voice laced with disapproval, "you're late." I glanced at my watch. "Actually, I'm 5 minutes early." She didn't respond, just turned her back and headed inside. "Everyone's already here, try not to make a scene." The living room hadn't changed, still decorated in my mother's signature neutral palette, the Christmas tree as pristine as any showroom display rather than a reflection of family warmth. The room was filled with familiar faces, local business leaders, my father's colleagues, and of course, my older brother, Michael. He was deep in conversation with a stranger I didn't recognize. My father saw me from across the room, his face hardening slightly. He excused himself from his conversation and made his way over, martini in hand. "So," he started, not bothering with pleasantries, "still working on that little online business?" I took a slow breath. "It's a digital consulting firm, Dad, and yes, it's doing well." He scoffed, taking a sip of his drink. "When are you going to get a real job?" "Michael just became a partner at his firm. He's handling accounts worth millions, and what do you have to show for yourself?" Before I could reply, my mother appeared beside us, guiding a well-dressed couple toward us. "Oh, Margaret, John, this is our daughter," she said, with that apologetic tone she always used when introducing me. "She's still figuring things out." Heat rushed to my face as Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what is it you do, dear?" "I run my own company," I started to explain, but my father interrupted with a laugh. "Look at our useless daughter," he chuckled, the alcohol making him bolder than usual. "Can't even land a real job." My mother added with a practiced laugh. "At least Michael's carrying on the family legacy. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with Olivia." The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in. I had built Horizon Digital from the ground up into a company on the verge of closing a $50 million deal, but to them, I was still the daughter who had failed to meet their standards. Just then, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. My mother's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, that must be James Anderson. He's considering a major contract with your father's firm." As she rushed to the door, I reached into my purse for my CEO badge, the one I'd almost left in the car. I'd come straight from our office Christmas party, where I'd just delivered a speech to 200 employees. The badge, with its embossed logo, was still clipped to my bag. The door swung open, and I heard my mother's overly enthusiastic greeting. "Mr. Anderson, we're so thrilled you could join us." Then, heavy footsteps moved toward the living room. I turned. Time seemed to stall. James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Technologies, froze mid-step. His gaze dropped to the badge clipped to my purse, then to my face, then back to the badge. "Madam Sue," he said, his voice echoing across the now silent room, "I had no idea these were your parents." A small smile tugged at my lips as I watched color drain from my parents' faces. The CEO badge glinted in the soft light, the lettering clear and unmistakable. Olivia Chin, CEO, Horizon Digital Industries. The very company poised to acquire the largest tech firm in the city. The same company that had just sealed a $50 million deal with Anderson Technologies. The same little online business my parents had mocked for years. My father's martini glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Sometimes karma doesn't knock. Sometimes it walks through the front door wearing a CEO badge. Silence spread like wildfire. The shards of my father's glass sparkled at our feet, just like the illusion of control my parents had clung to, now splintered beyond repair. Mr. Anderson, either oblivious or gracefully indifferent to the tension, stepped forward. "I have to say, Olivia has been nothing short of brilliant in leading our latest partnership," he said warmly. The innovation she brings to the table, truly impressive. He turned to my parents with a genuine smile. You must be incredibly proud. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again, lips moving without sound. My father looked as though someone had unplugged him. Michael suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Of course, my mother managed, her voice brittle. We're very proud. The lie hung in the air, thin and fragile. Mr. Anderson pressed on, unaware, or unconcerned. When she proposed that $50 million transformation initiative, I had my doubts, but her presentation, impeccable. Then, turning back to me with a knowing look, he added, and I've been hearing whispers about your acquisition of Techere Systems. That's bold. My father's head snapped toward me so fast I could almost hear it. Techere Systems, the largest tech firm in the region. The same company his firm had been courting for years, unsuccessfully. That's still under wraps, I replied, with a calm smile. But we'll have some exciting updates in the new year. My mother, ever the polished host, swept in to reclaim the atmosphere. Shall we move to the dining room? She offered, forcing brightness into her tone. Dinner is ready. The next hour passed in a haze of false pleasantries. I sat at the same table I'd grown up around, except now, my parents were performing like it was a stage. Gone were the cutting remarks and disappointed sighs. In their place, newfound pride and awkward admiration. Olivia's always been fiercely independent, my mother said with an airy laugh, conveniently forgetting her earlier criticisms. She's got my tenacity, my father added, as if he hadn't spent years insisting I was wasting my life. Michael kept stealing glances at me. The golden child, the family's crown jewel. Only now, he was seeing a new kind of success, one that didn't come pre-approved by our parents. Just as dessert arrived, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and barely suppressed a smile, an email confirming the close of another major deal, this one for $75 million. Important business? Mr. Anderson asked, catching my expression. You could say that, I replied, slipping the phone back into my bag. Year-end's always lively. Oh, that reminds me, he said, turning to my father. About the contract we discussed earlier. My father straightened, hope igniting in his eyes. This was the moment he'd orchestrated the entire evening for. We're heading in a different direction, Mr. Anderson said casually. After working with Horizon, I've decided to modernize everything through their platform. In fact, he looked back to me with interest. Olivia, I'd love to talk about expanding our contract further. The sound of my father's ambitions collapsing was almost audible. Later, as the guests began to trickle out, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother. She was loading the dishwasher, her movements stiff and sharp, every clink of ceramic a punctuation mark for the tension between us. Why didn't you tell us? She asked quietly, still facing the sink. I didn't hesitate. Would it have changed anything? I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. When I launched Horizon Digital, you told people I was between jobs. When I landed my first big client, you said I was still figuring things out. At what point would you have actually seen me for who I am? She turned then, and for the first time, I didn't see disappointment in her eyes. I saw fear. Fear that she had been wrong. Fear that she had invested in the wrong child. Fear that all her careful social maneuvering and perfectly orchestrated dinner parties had been for nothing. We just wanted what was best for you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I held her gaze. No, you wanted what looked best to everyone else. I picked up my purse from the counter, the CEO badge catching the light one last time. I should go, I've got an early meeting with TechCore. From the doorway, my father spoke. His voice was low, and something in it had softened. I didn't stop moving, but I paused at the threshold, turning just slightly. You know what's ironic? I said, all I ever wanted was for you to believe in me. Now that the whole world does, it doesn't matter if you ever do. The drive home was silent. My phone wasn't. First, a text from Michael. I had no idea. Can we talk? Then, an email from my mother. Darling, I know we've made mistakes. Please give us a chance to make it right. And finally, I was wrong. I'm sorry. From my father. I pulled into the garage, the one they once mocked for being in an unimpressive neighborhood. Now, it sheltered both my Mercedes and the beat-up Honda I'd once lived out of for 3 months while bootstrapping Horizon Digital. Inside, I headed straight to my office. I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder titled, Remember Why. Inside was a collection of years, screenshots of ignored texts, photos of missed birthdays, passive-aggressive holiday cards, and emails filled with casual dismissal. I added a new entry. Look at our useless daughter, can't even get a real job. December 24th, the day they finally saw me. My phone buzzed again, another message from my father, now about TechCore. Maybe we could discuss a potential partnership. I didn't reply, I simply closed the folder. Tomorrow, Horizon Digital would officially acquire TechCore Systems. Tomorrow, I'd sign a deal that exceeded my father's company's annual revenue. Tomorrow, I'd keep building an empire on my own terms. But tonight, I sat in the stillness of my office, staring at my reflection in the glass. The girl who once slept in her car. The daughter who never measured up. The woman who became a CEO. I glanced at the badge still clipped to my bag. It wasn't just a title. It was proof. Proof that success doesn't have to come dressed in someone else's approval. Sometimes, it comes from walking away, and proving that you never needed their permission to win. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Grant, your 8 a.m. with the TechCore board is confirmed. They're ready to sign. Thanks, Sarah, I said, then paused. Send flowers to my parents' house. The card should read, thank you for teaching me that the best revenge is massive success. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass. Somewhere out there, my parents were still processing what had happened. That their daughter, the one they once pitied, now held the key to their business's future. The best Christmas gifts aren't always wrapped in paper and bows. Sometimes, they're hard-won moments of clarity. Sometimes, they're silent victories. And sometimes, they're the stunned expressions on your parents' faces when they finally realize they were wrong about you. And you didn't need them to be right to succeed.